All right, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, must add for week 5 of the fantasy hockey season. As always, the video presented by FanDuel Canada, North America's #1 sportsbook, best place to be betting on the NHL this season. The link is in the description below to download the app. Last week's must adds didn't really pan out. For the kind of the stats that I checked out, Hayton scored 1 goal, had some shots. Pierre-Luc Dubois didn't really do all of much, although he's playing on a line still with McMichael and Dubois, who had good weeks as well. Just not a great week overall, I would say, for the must-adds, but still some guys in there that are starting to pan out, I would say, still long-term. Like, don't give up on those guys, per se, the ones that I gave out last week. But we got 7 new guys to add this week. Let's get into the video. All right, the first guy we're going to be adding, and this is for guys in 10 to 12-man leagues, if you need a defenseman, if you need a streamer this week, and a guy that I think could probably stay on your team for the longevity of the season, and that is Brandt Clarke on the Los Angeles Kings. Through 11 games, 11 points, so a point per game right now. His biggest value is 100% on the power play, especially with Drew Doughty out. Until Doughty comes back, which is still not for a while at this point, he is going to be very valuable in fantasy hockey. He's tied for the team lead, in power play points. Definitely a little bit of more of an assist merchant, but has a really talented shot and will be able to score goals as well as he continues to play in this offensive role for the LA Kings and Jim Hiller. As I mentioned, 4 games next week, and this is really the first full season we're getting of Brandt Clarke, I'm going to say, with the Kings in a full-on top 4 defenseman role. Defensively, his metrics aren't going to be great this season, but hopefully his stats are good enough offensively to continue to play 18 to 19 minutes per game, which will lead him to a roster spot on your fantasy hockey team. So add him if you can. All right, the next guy we're going to be picking up is Jake Walman on the San Jose Sharks. Defenseman. This guy was viable last year in fantasy hockey for parts of the year on the Detroit Red Wings. Had a really hot start to the season, and everyone thought he was going to be a go-to guy on that Red Wings team, especially like on the power play. 5-on-5, he was scoring goals too, but he ended up falling off a little bit as these kind of one-off, I want to say, offensive defenseman can, but he's in a much bigger role with the San Jose Sharks, especially with the ice time that he's playing, almost 23 minutes per game, 27% roster. That doesn't really pan out or make sense most of the time in fantasy hockey. You have a guy who's playing 23 minutes a game and he's 27% rostered. I understand he's on the San Jose Sharks, and if plus-minus is a huge category in your league, then yeah, I'd probably keep him off your team because the Sharks are still terrible. But he's on the first pair. He's on the second power play. He's on the first penalty kill as well. And you can see his value in bangers leagues already. 17 blocks, 30 shots on goal. I believe he has like 15 or 20 hits as well. So kind of a do-it-all defenseman. And he's going to get points as well as he plays in probably the more offensive roles for this Sharks team. And it seems like a lot of the young guys on the Sharks team are really starting to take a step offensively and being competitive in the NHL, like the Eklunds, the Zetterlands of this San Jose Sharks team. So I think you're going to see Walman have a decent season points-wise, and I don't think it'll be as bad plus-minus-wise as a lot of people will think, and he'll make up for it in the hits, blocks, shots department as well. All right, Gabe Vilardi, 24% rostered on the Winnipeg Jets. I don't know how this kid is still just 24% rostered. He is definitely a long-term ad. If you need a center or right wing, which is what his position availability is in Yahoo, I think this is the best pickup, like bar none. He's on that first line with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, and that line has been one of the best lines in the NHL to start the year. Apart from maybe Vegas's top line with Eichel, Barbashev, and Mark Stone, I would say the Jets' first line gets right up there because Kyle Connor's having an unbelievable start to the year. Scheifele's having a solid start, and Vilardi's finally starting to get it going. Scored the first goal against the Detroit Red Wings in their most recent win and contributed a couple assists as well. So on the season, 8 points, 3 goals, had a little bit of a slow start. Last year I remember had a pretty good start, but then got hurt, was out for like a month and a bit. Now, if he can stay fully healthy, I think this is the best pickup you can have this week for a guy that will stay on your team for the rest of the season. His ice time has also increased a lot. Maybe that's a difference between, bonus being there and not, but his ice time has gone from 17 minutes last year to almost 19 minutes per game this season. He's a really talented shooter. I think that will pay dividends, obviously. First power play, first line, 24% roster. That's crazy. Add him right now. All right, Alex Laferriere. I talked about him in week 1 of Must Add where he was like 2% rostered. He's still 21% rostered, and you need to add him on your fantasy hockey team. It's same as goes as Gabe Vilardi. He's been too good, and his shooting percentage is definitely high, but he's creating a ton of offense. Whenever he's on the ice, they are creating more offense than they're getting scored on. Or allowing, like for 100%. Doesn't matter who he's playing with, too. He started playing on that first line, with Kempe and Kopitar. It worked out well, but the Kings weren't really scoring elsewhere, so they split him up, brought Byfield back up there, moved Laferriere down to play with Turcotte and Warren Foegele, continued to score goals there as well. And then they moved Byfield to center on that line and Turcotte up to the first line. And he scored again. So, like, it doesn't matter what line combination this guy is on, he is going to score goals. He's also pretty physical, 21 hits on the year so far. He can play anywhere, I think, on this Kings roster and continue to contribute. I think this Kings roster is very good, very solid top 9 in terms of their forward group. I will just continue to beat this drum until he's not rosterable or able to be in these videos where he's more than 40% rostered. Definitely pick up Laferriere, especially the fact that Kings have 4 games this week. I think the addition of Byfield on that line and him continuing to play on power play 1, he is in one of the better pickups, I would say, to stream for next week if you just need a streamer, but also a guy I think you can keep on your team. All right, Dawson Mercer on the New Jersey Devils. 11% rostered. I thought that number was quite low, to be honest. Has the center and right wing availability in Yahoo Fantasy Hockey Leagues. So you can play him at the center spot. You can play him at the right wing spot. He is a streamer, I would say, for next week. The Devils have 4 games next week. They play the Oilers, the Sharks, the Habs, the Islanders. There's some really good matchups there to exploit. Devils players overall, like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier will probably continue to play really well, and Timo Meier, Dougie Hamilton. Those guys are going to have big weeks against these teams. So if you have those guys, you're in for a pretty pleasant week. He gets a lot of ice time, Dawson Mercer, for his role last year compared to this year, playing about 18 minutes per game. He's playing on that first line with Nico Hischier and Timo Meier. Not that he's never been on the first line for this Devils team over the past year and a half, 2 years, but I think he's going to keep this role. It seems like, Keefe seems like he's had a liking towards Dawson Mercer. He's playing on that second power play. I don't know if he likes him enough to put him on the first power play. I don't think that's going to happen considering the talent on the New Jersey Devils, but he's 3rd on the team in individual expected goals for over the last 3 games. So he's created the 3rd most amount of offense individually over the last 3 games, which is very important to note considering he's playing on a team with so many good players offensively who drive a ton of offense. So Dawson Mercer next week, the fact they have 4 games is a massive boost, and only 11% rostered. He will pretty much be widely available in most leagues, I would say. All right, another long-term ad here. Pavel Dorofeyev on the Vegas Golden Knights, 10% rostered, playing on the left wing for this team, playing on that second line with Tomas Hertl, playing on that first power play as well. And he has been an absolute force recently. He leads the team in expected goals for over the last 3 games played. He's pretty much when he's on the ice, and I think Tomas Hertl is a very good complement to Dorofeyev because they've tried him in a couple different spots, tried him on the first line, but it seems like he's really found this role well, and on that first power play too. It's just hard to pass this guy up at 10% rostered. And I think this will probably stay relatively true for the rest of the season, Dorofeyev playing in this similar type of role. The only way it hurts is when Victor Olofsson eventually comes back. He's week to week with an injury that he suffered, I want to say 2 weeks ago now. So he'll be back in 2 to 3 weeks, I would say, at the very most, and he could come back and take his role on the first power play and be that goal scorer that he was before he got hurt. He had 3 goals in 4 games. Dorofeyev was a little bit more quiet in those first 4 games for sure. So he only plays 2 games, or Vegas only plays 2 games next week. But look at it, 11 games played, 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points, 32 shots on goal with a shooting percentage that isn't that crazy. And he's playing about 16 minutes per game. I'm going to say that's going to probably increase by at least a minute over the next month or so. So I think Dorofeyev is a very good pickup if you're in need of a left winger, even for the rest of the season. If you're in those deeper leagues, he's a slam dunk pick. It's just unfortunate he only plays 2 games next week. All right, the last ad of the week, 2% rostered. To be honest, I'm trying to get ahead of the narrative here, try to get this player on your guys' team, and it's a little risky for sure, but I think it's kind of worth the risk. The Nashville Predators have certainly struggled to score recently. Stamkos hasn't scored or has scored 1 goal this year, but he's ripping the puck on the net, just can't find the back of the net. I would say across the board, this team is just struggling to score. Saros has been playing well, but relatively inconsistent. Just had a pretty bad game recently against the Edmonton Oilers where they lost 4-5-1. Tommy Novak on the Predators is 2% rostered. Playing that center position. He started in that center role with Stamkos and Marchessault. First couple games, Brunette clearly didn't like it, moved, had Sissons in that role. Moved Tommy Novak kind of all over the place, was playing on that third line, combination of Luke Evangelista and some of the other guys that they have there. They're continuing to mix up the lines. And last week, they had Sissons play a game at center with those 2 guys. They had Tommy Novak play a game at center between those 2 guys. So it really depends on what Andrew Brunette ends up doing, but I think he's going to lead towards Tommy Novak for a couple of reasons here. The last 2 weeks, I think Novak has played better on that line if you look at how much offense they've been able to create than Colton Sissons. Colton Sissons, he's a third line center. He doesn't fit in a second especially when you're playing with Stamkos and Mercer. So, like, I don't think he has the skill necessary to really, like, compete, or not compete, but continue to play with those guys. I definitely think Tommy Novak does. I would say he's either the third or fourth most talented shooter on this team. I've talked about it before on Money Puck. They have a stat shooting talent above average, a percentage, and he has the third highest on the team, 15% shooting talent above average. Money Puck grades his shooting ability, which is very high. It's not as high as, like, say, Stamkos or maybe Philip Forsberg, but it's very high. So they do have 4 games next week as well. They play the Kings, Capitals, Panthers, and Utah. So some tough matchups, but definitely some favorable matchups as well. It'll be interesting to see where the lines end up by the end of that week. That's kind of where the telltale will be if you want to keep Tommy Novak. But if you're in a deep league and you can store guys, I don't think there's any problem with adding Tommy Novak at this point. He could be a good plug and play next week as well. I think he'll solidify his role a little bit more on that second power play too, and continue to kind of produce 3 goals through the season in 9 games played. Honestly, that's probably close to leading the Nashville Predators in goals at this point. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of Must Add Week 5. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Shout out to FanDuel Canada for sponsoring the video, and I'll see you guys next time.